Hello there, mudslingers. Lou here again with HD Pottery Studio in Seattle, Washington. Video number 2. Hopefully it's going to be much better than video number 1. And maybe not by much, but I will try. Let's get ready and let's talk about clay and wedging. Let's put on this apron so it looks like I belong in a clay shop. And let's talk about clay. What is clay? Clay is basically, if you looked, oh, I have a lunch bag here. Let me pull out part of my lunch. It's made out of little platelets or particles. And for our demonstration, we're gonna call them little lentils. Little lenticular structures that look like this when you put them under a microscope. There's no rhyme or reason of how they're laying here or how they're oriented. They're just laying here, and it's very similar with clay. Your job as a potter is to wedge them properly, align them, make the structure therefore a lot tighter, and you will get much better results out of a kiln. Not only out of a kiln, it will be easier to center, it will be easier to work with. A lot of us believe that it's going to be very much easier to throw with, besides the fact that you will also have a much better result coming out of a kiln. There's going to be less cracks, there's going to be less deformations, and wedging doesn't just align the platelets. We're going to get into it. Wedging does so much more for us. However, if you're a beginner potter, and you must be since you're watching this video, you probably hate wedging. You probably try to fudge it, you probably try to avoid it. Do you have to do it? No, you don't have to do it. There's other ways. You don't have to do anything. But as you progress and as your pottery gets better and as your coffee mugs look better, you're going to have a desire for them to be even better and even better. And that will force you to go back to basics, and it will force you to think about wedging, and it will then produce a much better product. Besides the fact that you will enjoy it. You will, trust me. And you may find it meditative. You may find it that it prepares your mindset for work. I also want to try some experiments today, and we're going to see if we can talk about wedging in a way I haven't seen talked about. I'm very analytical. I think about my processes, and when I first started wedging and throwing, it didn't make much sense. I tried to avoid it, I didn't like it. I would much rather cone up and down a couple of times, and we're gonna get into all of that. So let's grab a little bit of clay. We have, this one's a little dirty, but we will call it for our purposes Oregon White. I drive down to Puyallup to get my clay at the Clay Art Center down there. Wonderful people, wonderful customer service. I love to support local businesses, and since I'm doing a plug, I'm going to also mention Seattle Art Supply. Wonderful company, wonderful customer service, and even though they have no idea that I even exist or who I am, I love supporting them because they always treat me well. So let's play with this for just a second. Let's make sure that there are no bubbles. This is essentially how you wedge, but don't worry, you're not going to miss anything. What we're going to do is we're going to take it right from the start, but I want to make sure that I have somewhat of a bowl that right now doesn't have any air inside or any irregularities, and we're going to actually create an irregularity. And since I'm a nurse, we have a standard 10 cc lure lock syringe, and we're going to take here a little bit of slip, brown slip that is, since we have white clay, and we're going to see if we can backfill it and how much we can actually put in there. This is my favorite slip brush, probably a couple of pennies off of Amazon, and we will see, I don't know, 2-3 mils or something like that. Pretty fairly big air bubble, and we will get into those logistics as well, because can you throw when there's some air bubbles in the clay? Certainly, but we will talk about what that looks like and what it may cause for you. And so if you can avoid it in the beginning and have some fun with it, why wouldn't we? So let's take a look. Let's take a look at what we have here. All right, so let's agree we have about 2 mils of brown slip in there and a 16 gauge needle here, and looks like we could go kind of in the middle somewhere, and we will see if this works or how much we can put in there. Okay, looky. It's giving me resistance now. Okay, let's see if it's gonna squirt in our face or what's gonna happen. Certainly, it doesn't want to go in there anymore. Maybe there is a, oh, there we go. Maybe there was a grain of sand in there. And so technically speaking, let's just pretend you cut yourself a piece of clay, you made a little ball out of it. You don't even know that there's a 2 mil air bubble in there, do you? You have no idea. If we cut it in half, certainly it would be there. Let's just not do that. Let's go through wedging. We're gonna do ram's head wedging today, and let's see what that looks like. It looks something like this. You are basically going to make a fruit roll-up out of your clay, and your objective is to, with series of premeditated movements, you will get the inside of the clay on the outside, and it will become homogenized, it will become the same. Hopefully we will be able to prove here that you will also incorporate that brown slip in there without even noticing big streaks and without even changing much color, because this is a lot of white clay. So this would be wedging, and we're going to, hopefully you can see my hands. I have a couple of cameras here set up. Thanks to Rod, by the way. Thank you for your support. And important part when wedging is you keep lateral pressure on your clay, and you sort of, if you can see, this should look like a ram's head. However, it looks like my ram got hit by a truck. Let's give it a couple more continuous movements here, and let's see where this gets us. Okay. And as you can see, can you see that you're basically making a fruit roll up here? And if we keep going, eventually our air bubble from in the middle of the clay would have to make its way to the outside. It would pop. See? Can you see? Just in case that camera's not working. Very, very slight resemblance of that brown slip. And we are just going to keep wedging here. By the way, since we're doing this, there's a couple of ways you can think about, about wedging. So you can homogenize 2 different pieces of clay together. You also can homogenize the moisture in the clay. So especially, it's not as important if you get a brand new clay. However, if you start using offcuts, if you start using like handle leftovers, if you start using cycled clay from the sink over here, then it will be much more important to wedge properly. All right, so fruit roll up in over here, and it looks like we rolled it into a nice tight spiral. We somewhat have a ram's head, and let's see what it looks like if we were to cut it. Okay, so let's cut it this way, just so we see what it's in there. Ready? Okay. All right, and let's then that bubble has to be somewhere, no? Let's cut this just as well. See how that, in our case, it wasn't a bubble. That's why you can see the streaks. And that gets me to a second point I was trying to make. You can use it to homogenize clay, wedging, or you can use it for artistic effects and just sort of halfway blend a couple of different clays. Presumably they have the same shrinkage rate and they are about the same consistency, but you don't only have to make one homogenized piece of clay out of it, you can also make it swirly or fun. All right, so since we have this, let's see what else we can talk about. So let's talk about other benefits of wedging, okay? Very clearly, now I'm talking, but if I wasn't, I could focus just on the wedging and I could get much more feeling for the clay. My mind will focus on the task at hand. It will tune everything else out. You may find that you're grooving to music. You may find that you're not thinking about anything else, whatever else is going on in your life, and all the hard stuff will float away because you are doing repetitive, mindless movements, and you're preparing the clay and yourself to create something really nice out of it. So let's see if we can. This is maybe too much clay, so we will just slice a little bit off, and let's see if we can put it on a wheel and center it. Then we can come back, maybe revisit a couple other points. I know I'm a little jumpy, I'm a little disorganized, but hopefully it will all turn to something. We'll borrow this camera here. We're gonna put him right here and see if you can see the wheel. Beautiful. We'll borrow this camera here and maybe put him from a slightly different angle here. Oh, well, it's a little bit of a mistake here. A little bit of a mistake. Let's see. We're gonna maybe. I am some cinematographer, I'll tell you. All right. Let's look at bats. Lots of people throw without bats. They wire it off. It's not necessarily a problem. I recommend you get a couple of bats, at least to begin with. You can do what you want. I don't know what the right thing to do is, but my recommendation would be do it. Now, if you notice, these wheels have two little lugs where this bat will clip into. However, on the other side of the bat, you see this is for 10-inch and this is for 12-inch. One of these is always oval and one of them is round. I prefer to start with the round one, and that's why I mark my bats. So I always know it has 3 lugs, but it has 3 lugs over here too on the ellipse. And so I usually just mark the one with the round, and that will make it hopefully a lot easier to put on the wheel. If you start with the oval one, then you may actually be off and it's not going to clip. So I like to start with, well, of course today is not going to be my day because I'm trying to show you something. Let's make sure that this is at least moist, if not wet. We don't want it wet, but we also don't want it super dry. And let's see if we can see a difference between wedged and unwedged. All right, so put it somewhere in the middle, a little bit of water, push down, adhere it to the wheel, We'll see. There we go. This was one way to do it. We will see if we can take another lump of clay over here. I'm gonna have to move this because here's a second bat. I don't know if I marked this one. Okay. Let me wipe that. Pottery can be quite messy. Potters can be quite organized and clean, and quite neglectful at the same time. And let's see if we can find another bowl here that is maybe not necessarily wedged that well. If you see this, technically speaking, you can cone it up and down, you can center it. Okay, can we push down a little bit? Oh baby. Okay. You hear it? You hear the smacking? And so, certainly, I can do some work here, and I can cone it up and down a few times and get rid of the air bubbles this way. I do recommend, if you do this, just push it to the side because it will gather on the outside of your cone. All right, now here is the question. Is this worth it? This is hard work. It takes a long time, and you're never sure if you really got everything, okay? I can do this for the next 2-3 minutes here because it wasn't wedged. It wasn't wedged properly at all. And can I make something out of it? Sure, we can open it up and we can make a mug out of it, but why chance it? Why do it the long way? Why have your wall collapse, or why? Go back to basics. Take this off, put it on a wedging board. By the way, wedging board, you can use a piece of wood, you can use a piece of cement board. You can use a lot of things to wedge on. Usually they're covered in canvas. Let me just wash up a little bit. Let's put this somewhere where you guys can see me. You can also use a plasterboard, and you can use wedging to get rid of excess moisture out of the clay. That is also a benefit of wedging. And if you wedge on a plasterboard, your clay will immediately start becoming drier. Immediately. Let's talk about little air bubbles or air pockets in your clay. Is it important to get rid of them? What happens if you have them? So let's talk about it. Air expands when it's heated. It's not necessarily a problem if there is an air pocket somewhere in the wall of your mug. However, air heated from room temperature, 2000 degrees Celsius, will expand about 300 times. That doesn't mean that your wall will explode. Your wall, while in a bisque fire, is not actually airtight or watertight. Air can still move in and out through the walls, and so can water. Water and air have pretty much about the same consistency, meaning the same molecular size. I believe that water is about 0.27 nanometers, and a molecule of nitrogen, which air mostly consists of, is about 0.3, 0.27 to 0.3. So for our conversation, air molecule and water molecule is pretty much the same. They can both move in and out of the clay body through the pores of the clay, even though as it's firing, the pores are tightening and getting smaller. My point here is, if you heat up air from room temperature to 1000 degrees Celsius, it will expand about 300 times, 330 or something like that, I believe it is. And so you will have a considerable size air bubble, even if it was small before it went into the kiln. It's not going to be 300 times bigger. because the clay will give and a lot of that air will escape. But you will have a product where it will be noticeable that there's a bubble. You're not going to like it, you're going to be frustrated, and you're not going to be able to sell it because your customers are not going to be happy. So wedge it and get rid of those air bubbles. Now, some people say that you have to leave air hole open for air to escape if you were to like make a football out of clay. That has been disproven. Mainly what you would have to worry about is moisture. If you make a ball out of clay that has air in the middle and you don't make any holes for the air to escape, it's not necessarily a problem. It's been done before. You can put it in a kiln if it's completely bone dry, and you can fire it and it will come out completely intact. It's not going to explode. It is, however, going to explode if you left moisture in there. And moisture would be a much bigger problem. Moisture expands much faster and at a much higher rate than air expands. Air to expand from room temperature to 1000 degrees Celsius over hours before you reach that temperature will expand 300 times. So yes, your air bubble may get a little bit bigger, but it's not going to be exploding. When molecule of water changes into steam at 212 or higher, it actually expands 1700 times. And so that's what you've heard before when things explode in a kiln. If you put a product in there that is not completely bone dry or you didn't use long enough drying cycle, you will have explosions. And the reason is it expands so rapidly and so tremendously, 1700 times the size of the original molecule in a matter of fraction of a second. And so you will have shrapnel all over your kiln. Well, we covered clay. We showed you little platelets. We showed you how to ram's head wedge. We talked about whether it's important or whether it's not important. We covered some basics of get rid of your air bubbles before you put your clay on a wheel. And maybe next time we will try spiral wedging, or we'll actually talk about how to pull walls, how to center clay, how to make nice discs. I didn't make a super nice one today. It also wasn't necessary. It was simply to prove my point. And hopefully you learned something today that you didn't see anywhere else. All right, mudslingers, I'll talk to you later.